I'm Esther, and I will be sharing about the effects of aerobic exercise and resistance training on adolescents with depression. And by the way, I'm from Seattle, Washington. So I chose to investigate and compare the specific impacts of aerobic and resistance exercise on mental health because of the surge of depression and anxiety in adolescents during the COVID lockdown. As a student athlete, nearby gyms around me were offering free membership for teens, and this really piqued my curiosity about the efficacy of different modes of exercise and their effects on adolescents with depression. So, moving on. To begin with, the preventative health measures of quarantine, social distancing, and school closures have adversely impacted adolescents' psychological well-being by disrupting their developmental periods and increasing their sedentary behavior, such as when you watch TV or when you are just laying down on the couch. It has decreased habitual exercise, which is the reason why I'm going over this. And in March of 2022, the CDC reported 37% of high school students having poor mental health. In recent years, there have been more efforts to understand the effects of exercise interventions on mental health. And previous trials, have indicated exercise's beneficial effects on depressive symptoms, which are comparable to antidepressant use. Exercise interventions can be broadly categorized as aerobic or strength training. And for the purpose of my research, I focused on aerobic exercise and strength training. There are some limitations to the previous studies that I looked over while conducting my research. So the first was they didn't really compare which mode of exercise was more effective, which was aerobic exercise versus resistance. They mostly focused on aerobic exercise, and there were very few studies that included both or even included resistance exercise alone. And many of the studies I looked over focused on adult populations and didn't really have a focus on adolescents. So I wanted my study to solely focus on adolescents and their depressive symptoms only. This was very significant because adolescents significantly differ from adults due to their lack of full development and hormonal fluctuations. So in this presentation, I will help you understand more thoroughly the effects of aerobic exercise and resistance training by comparing and analyzing previous exercise trials that use aerobic and resistance exercises that also focus on adolescents. And as a conclusion, I will wrap that all up and have recommendations for future studies that may want to include exercise interventions and see the results on adolescents' mental health. So the participants in my study are all ages within the ages of 10 to 25, also known as Generation Z or Gen Z, and they were all diagnosed with depression screening tools and evaluation tools. There were a total of 9 different studies, 9 different screening and evaluations tools that were used all across the studies. So there wasn't one uniform. And the studies, including adolescents with physical or non-depressive mental illnesses, were excluded, such as cancer, kids with cancer, obesity, or diabetes. And these are all confounding variables that I found across the studies that eliminated a lot of them. This is for future complications in bias and in the results that might complicate the results and not reflect the true majority of adolescent populations. So there was a total number of 9 studies that I included in my literature review, and there were 640 participants overall. And the average age of the participants was 15, almost 16, which was below what I wanted, so that was good. That means that there was more adolescent focus rather than a young adult focus. And there were 2 types of exercise interventions that I studied. which are aerobic and resistance interventions. Some examples of aerobic exercise are dancing, walking, sports, jogging, and biking. There were also a lot more in the studies I included. And for the aerobic and resistance intervention, there were programs that included both, including a CrossFit program and a weightlifting program. So this is a little summary chart of the data I extracted from all my studies. And all these studies were included because of the inclusion criteria they had, and they weren't excluded due to the exclusion criteria that I just went over. And I will be dissecting this chart in this presentation. So out of the total 9 depression studies that I included, there were 9 screening tools. And since I told you that all these tools are very different, they have a total number of depression items that were evaluated that differ from each other, which means that the results, although they might indicate a significant change or a non-significant change, it won't be all uniform. And so I took the percentage change from the baseline and subtracted the results from the baseline to find the percentage change, which shows me a uniform of all the studies that I included in my literature review. So looking at the durations of the interventions and of the studies, it was found that the interventions with 30 to 45-minute each session, 3 sessions a week for at least 10 weeks, provided significant results. Studies with follow-ups at 12 and 26 weeks indicated an even more significant decrease in depressive symptoms. And also, if you see this one down here, it was because there was a total of 20 hours of exercise, but the participants chose what to do with those 24 hours and when they wanted to do it. So in conclusion, I found that aerobic exercise definitely does decrease depression scores on the tools that they use to evaluate how significant their depression was, whether it was minimal or very major. And aerobic and resistance interventions proved that they were more effective in decreasing depression scores than only aerobic exercise. And both showed that effects were not significant immediately post-intervention around 6 weeks, meaning that if the intervention was around 6 weeks and they took the results then, it would not show a significant decrease in depression scores. However, if they followed up at 12, 24 weeks, it would show that the participants that stayed within the intervention had more decreased scores. So as a summary, exercise for at least 30 minutes, 3 times a week for at least 10 weeks can decrease depressive symptoms, although very minimally. Both exercise interventions decrease depressive symptoms and can lead to participants reaching remission or no longer qualifying for a major depressive disorder, so they will have less depressive symptoms. Remission was reached in the studies by participants after 12 weeks. So 12 weeks on, they would show less and less depressive symptoms. There were some limitations to the study, and I want to discuss it. So there was an average of 64.47% of female participants, meaning that 2 of the studies actually had 100% female participants, no male counterparts. And for the future, it would be much better to have a more equal percentage of participants, meaning like 50 or even 51, 52 or 49, 48% of female or male participants. And it would also be beneficial if all the studies included a 12-week, 24-week, or even 6-month follow-up, just to see how how significant exercise can have on one's mental health. And I just wanted to discuss a couple of the experiments I saw that where the control group of the participants took antidepressants while the experimental group took antidepressants while also engaging in exercise. So the antidepressant group had a difference between their baseline depression scores and the results, but the experimental group reached remission much faster and much sooner than the control group. So this goes on to show that exercise, once combined with antidepressant treatment, can be very efficient and effective in helping patients reach remission. Another couple of the studies had a control group that did stretching, which is exercise in minimally, which very minimal, while comparing that to an experimental group that engaged in rigorous aerobic exercise. So the stretching, although it was exercise and you are moving your body, it didn't show as much effect as the rigorous exercise, which can be, you know, very common knowledge, but this is just showing that the more rigorous you engage in exercise, the potentially you can have better mental and maintain better mental health. However, there are some experiments that included 90-minute sessions, and those participants actually did not see a very significant change in their depression scores, which also goes on to show there is a limit to how long and how much exercise you should do. And in conclusion, aerobic exercise and resistance training improves depressive symptoms for adolescents with depression. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Esther. First question from the audience. Curious about some of the data that you showed. You said that there were not immediate effects at 6 weeks, but there were at 12.
Yes.
I'm curious if you have a hypothesis about why that might be.
I think it's just the duration of the experiment, and across all the studies of the ones that had follow-ups, it shows that although the participation from the participants were less, the ones that regularly engaged in exercise showed better mental health and at exponential rates, actually. So I think the rigor of it is important, but it also is the duration of the engagement.
Got it. And kind of somewhat related to that, I'm curious if you could break down within exercise, what do you think are some of the actual kind of mechanics that might decrease depression? Is it the self-esteem? Is it just the challenge? If you had to kind of speculate as to what are the actual drivers of that kind of change in mental health, I'm curious if you have ideas.
Yeah. So when you exercise, there are neuroepinephrines that are non-epinephrines and epinephrines that are released in the brain, and so those go through the synapse with, okay, so this is like more neural at this point, but the synapse kind of gives feelings of dopamine and serotonin, which might be familiar terms, which can get like make you feel fulfilled and more happy. So when you exercise, those are released, and neurotrophins, sorry, that was the word, neurotrophins are released, and that makes you feel more happy. And the more you engage in exercise, the feelings of happiness and fulfillment increase. So that kind of conflicts with feelings of sadness that are usually defined with the depression. And so the more you engage in exercise, more of those are released. And also when you exercise, you are also burning calories and you're also decreasing your weight. So if you have a healthy diet, maintain sleep, and exercise, it will give you a healthier lifestyle, which gives you more feelings of happiness, and you will also be more satisfied with your own body, and it's just your self-perceivance. So all those go to decrease your depressive symptoms. So it's just the bigger picture of that.
Got it. Yeah, there's quite a bit going on there.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, totally.
All right. So you mentioned there was like an upper limit for exercise
Yeah.
where like exercising more gets you more antidepressive effects, but there's like a point where exercising more won't really help anymore. Do you know where that point is?
Yeah, so one of the studies that I included had a 90-minute session, 3 sessions a week for around 6 weeks. And that study actually, I thought that my hypothesis originally would be like, oh, these participants would actually perform much better on their next evaluation, but that was actually not the case. And they showed not a lot of significance in their scores. I think that was because if you look at my chart, or I don't know if I can pull it up again, but all the other studies had 30-minute to max an hour really of intervention. And that one was the only outlier with 90 minutes. And I think the participants, along with the antidepressant medication, was like, this is too much for their body. So I think it's just getting used to it really. And jumping into that much rigorous exercise can be very harmful if you are not slipping into it easily. And it's just the human body not adjusting fast enough, I think, to that amount of exercise.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for the question, Simon. I think we'll see. You and Esther have some stuff in common. You might want to link
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Yeah, we have like the same prompts. I mean,
Oh, actually, oh,
yeah,
That's okay. That's okay.
total
that's all
coincidence,
right.
but yeah,
You're just going to increase the body of literature. So
yeah.
thank you so much, Esther.
Yes, of course. I'm glad to be here.